Hi, everybody. I hope there are a few that are able to join me. I like to talk a lot, but my husband and I, we've heard all each other's stories, or we were there when it happened. So there's nowhere to really put these out there. And I just think some of them are crazy or incredible. And so I thought, I would bring them out here and see what you guys think. See if you guys have any experiences like I do. Um, it's before I go into my stories, I want to say welcome, little brother and Rebecca Costilla. I hope I said that correctly. Hi, Demon King. Queen Satan says hello. Uh, Jams X. I think I said that right. And Delilah Bruce. What a beautiful name. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for subscribing. It's greatly appreciated. Now, that we have got some of the formal stuff out of the way, I think my first story, I've been really going over my head trying to figure out what's going to be the best storyline that I can share with you for the first one. And I had made an entire video telling about an experience that I had in the 1980s. And there was a lot of things I could not put in that video, either because I remembered them after I made up the video up, or I didn't have enough time, because I was trying to do it in an entertaining, format. You want to try and make people like what they see when they watch you and share with you. And that's what I was kind of trying to do. And I had a dream the other night that said, be myself. I think you'll do better than with my little TikTok characters. And maybe my dream was right. Maybe I should look at it that way. I've had enough strange dreams in my life that when I have one that sticks with me and I recall it pretty well, that's the ones I pay close attention to. I don't know about y'all. Now, I am not an overly spiritual person or anything like that, but I do believe in ghosts. Absolutely believe in ghosts. I've had too many experiences with benign spirits and angry spirits. So, yeah, I definitely believe. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe that dreams can tell you or warn you about something? I had a dream when I was pregnant with my daughter, Crystal, that I was going to meet someone that I was going to be with for a long time. And I was pregnant with her, and she was not in the dream anywhere. The dream was so vivid, but it was all in this black and white and grayish. And I don't know if that means that's something from my past coming into my future or what. But in the dream, I'm standing off in the darkness and I'm looking at this brilliant white, and I mean, it should be hurting my eyes. It's so bright light. And it's a pickup truck of all things. And it could have been any color, but in the dream, it was just glowing white. And I saw a hand motioning for me to come out of the darkness and come towards it. And I did, very cautiously, because I didn't know where I was. I didn't recognize anything because there was nothing. There was this blackness and this truck, and that was it. And so I did go towards the truck because I don't know, maybe it's my first instinct is to go towards light. Uh, so I went, and the pickup door, passenger door opened, and the hand reached out and motioned again for me to come closer and get in the truck. And I was very hesitant at first. And when I looked at the hand, I saw the hand was bones. They were not flesh. I don't know why I thought it was. I could see clearly it was the hands of bones, and it was beckoning me into the truck. I got into the truck, and I closed the door, and I looked over, and there sat this very hooded skeleton, is the only way I could put it. And I had that dream over and over again. But the last time I had that dream, I wish my mother was here because she could tell you about it too. She remembers the time, me telling her about it every morning at 13 mornings. And the final dream that I had, the pickup truck I was sitting in turned on the headlights out and lit up the darkness. And I saw people, and I saw a city. I saw a place I really didn't recognize. It was a place that was familiar but not familiar. It had changed or something. I don't know. But I looked back over at the skeleton, and they pointed for me to get out of the truck. So I climbed out of the truck, and they pointed for me to walk in front of it. So I did. Only a few years later, I would have left my husband at the time and had my daughter, of course. I had a son as well by that time. But I did leave, and I moved to Texas because I had nowhere to go. I turned to my father. He was like, well, come on, baby girl. I'll give you a brace. My door is always open. And so I went there, and I walked into the house, which was just a small cottage. It was really cozy. It was a nice place. My father and his wife had been renting it for years. They'd been there for a long time. They're pretty well established, and they gave me a room of my own. And after I got some rest, and I went to go into a bathroom where you had to walk through my father's wife's son bedroom. And it was very neatly kept. And I just looked around because he had a mural he had painted and drawn on a wall. And it was instantly, I knew, because there was the Reaper looking in the window, holding the earth in his hand. All this stuff going on behind it. But I knew it was the same skeleton I had seen, the one with the pickup. And, well, that man ended up my husband. Has been for 30 years. So, and it was all preset. I think it was preset. And I think he knew it by the images he saw within himself. And I definitely knew it by the dreams I had and the way I had them. And out of all my children, my husband is closest to that daughter that I was carrying when I had the dream. Makes me wonder if sometimes she was supposed to be his. But that's a whole nother story. So, anyway, hey, I made it 10 minutes, baby. Jack Hyden. As Jack's getting older, he's wanting to get more adventurous, and we don't allow him to break the rules. If he manages to get down by the road, and it's very easy to do, he would end up dead very quickly because these people drive through here very fast, and you can't get out of the way, and they're not going to move for an animal. Because out here, animals, if you hit them, I mean, they'll try to avoid them to keep from getting damage to the vehicles, but most of them seem to run right into them. Have you ever lived in a place like that where the deer will get you? You know, I worried about Texas drivers a lot because they were zoom, 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 zoom real fast. And so they scared me. Anything going fast these days, it scares me. But I used to be like that, you know, zoom everywhere. Quick as a busy bee. Gosh, those were long, far days. Anyway, that was my story. I told you it was a short one. It was just about my dream and how it brought my husband. Oh, by the way, when I walked outside, we went up to his pickup truck and listened to music and just talked. I mean, I didn't know that was what the dream meant, that I would always be with him. But that's how it turned out. And I think that's pretty cool. Told you I get forgetful. So sometimes might have to wait a little bit when I'm telling a story. I'm not a Mr. Ballin or the White Files, AJ, or even a Hecklefish at that. But I do have some stuff that I know my family would look at me like, really? Until they'd have some kind of experience of their own. And my youngest daughter has definitely got a psychic nature to her. I actually use cannabis to suppress dreams because I used to have nightmares. And it does work. It works quite well. But it takes regular use because when you stop using it, the dreams come back. And I couldn't function in life that way. I don't know anybody who could function in life having night terrors. It just doesn't work. And my mother once said she thought there was a curse on our family. And she said it more than one time. So it makes you wonder, is it possible that something like that could be real? I do believe in the power of conscious thought, projecting energy, that kind of thing, I guess. Most of that kind of stuff I learned from my mother or on my own, from my own experiences. I don't know how many people out there actually have ever had an out of body experience. I have, and I remember it vividly. And I'm almost 60, and that was probably 15, 20 years ago when that happened. And, so some things stick with you. Okay. All right. I did tell my story. Yes, it wasn't a very long story. I told you it would be a short one. And I wasn't sure if anybody that I tagged would be able to come see it. I hope they could, but I'd love to see them or at least talk to them. You know, I have a lot of family on Facebook, and I don't get to connect with them that often because we all live far apart from each other. And when you don't get that kind of connection with each other, it makes you long for them, you know? You know what I mean? Okay, I guess I'm mumbling now because I'm not sure what to do. But all my advisors told me the longer uh, you stream, the more chances your streams will be seen. But if you're coming in at this scene, you're gonna go bye later, and I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame you because I might listen to the ramblings for a little bit, but I'm not sure that I'd stick around. So, anyway, I do have another story. This one is about a ghost when I was a little girl. We were living in New Mexico, and I was probably 5 at that time, about 5 years old. I should have been in school, but I wasn't. My parents were so poor that the house we were living in, they were squatters. They did not pay rent. They found this empty house and we moved in. And my mother was pregnant with her fourth child. And some will say, no, no, that's wrong. That would be her third. You're her second eldest. No, her second eldest did not live. Eldest girl did not live very long. That would make me the third child. Just because she didn't have a long life, I shouldn't discount her as living when she did. And her name was Valerie, by the way. And no, I don't remember her. Uh, she died before I was born. I was the next child after her. And so, it was poor American people, real poor. My father came from pretty much the basic abusive, impoverished home, and my mother came from the same. So, they were kids when they got together. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. So, they didn't know how to make their lives any better. And they just kind of had a love hate relationship like most parents. So, I grew up in a household that was always erratic when my father was home. He was gone most of the time. And my mother, sometimes she would get hit with bouts of depression, but for the most time, she just tried to make do and make best out of whatever situation we were living in. Even when they were trying to come and put her out on the street, and my dad had been gone a week or 2 weeks and hadn't sent not any money, but he's supposedly earning money. And so it was just a messed up time. I mean, where the ghost that I met as a child came to me, I was actually laying in a bedroom. It was me. Uh, my mother was pregnant with my sister Diana, and I had my sister Patty and my older brother Johnny. And we were all sleeping on one mattress in the room because that's all there was. And I have no idea where the mattress came from. It was filthy. There were no sheets. It was not it was a, for the moment and those times, it was a suitable place for a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 9-year-old to be sleeping. And it was always fighting for a little bit of space. It wasn't a great big mattress. I would say full size, maybe. You're talking in the 60s. Uh, yeah, it was still 60s. And so I would say it was a rough existence. We sat on the floor in the kitchen to eat. We didn't have a table or chairs. I remember at some point, my mother started taking us and going to church. She made a friend there, and they gave us a little bit of furniture and a little bit of kids' clothing and those kind of things, and kind of helped us so we weren't so hungry all the time. But then when my dad would come around, it would get really tense at first. And then they kind of coaxed him into it. And for a little while, we did pretty good. And I mean, church mice had more than we did, but we still had each other. And even if we annoyed each other and irritated each other like children do, we clung to each other like children do. And so things would get better. And then bad things would happen, and we would end up moving. And when we moved, we had a car. We weren't taking any furniture. And it was just to wherever my dad had found an abandoned house that he could put us in. And this was the cycle of our lives for years. And we went between Mexico and Texas. Um, and then when those places would get unbearable, we'd go back to Chicago because my grandmother, who held a job, my aunt held a job, they would help us get the money to go back to Illinois and have a place to stay and start over. But while we were in one of the homes in Hobbs, New Mexico, um, my parents were fighting. And I mean, screaming at each other. My brother, he just laid his arm over his ear to cover him as best he could, pressed his head into the mattress, and Patty just laid quietly, listening to every word, but not making a sound. And so did I. And at some point, I dozed off because there was no hitting involved in this time. But I remember wishing, as I dozed off, that I had been never born, that I didn't belong in a place so angry, that it would make me angry. And there was already a lot going on in life that I was angry about. So at the tender age of 5, you go to sleep wishing you'd never been born. I remember waking up to a cool breeze brushing on my arm. And I just opened my eyes and I looked. In front of me was this lady. And I quickly looked over at Johnny and Patty, and they were sound asleep. And she told me it was okay. And she reached out and stroked my hair, just gently, like my grandma used to do. And she told me it will get better. And then she stood up straight, and I realized I could see through her. But I can still, to this day, see her. And she had long black hair. She was wearing a gray, almost looked kind of wool, maybe. I doubt it was cotton. If it was cotton, it was not refined cotton. And a skirt that was similar, that went to the floor. And she was soft spoken, never scared me. And I went to sleep after that. And when I woke up, I remembered it. And I knew that woman was not real that I saw. And I mean real as like flesh and bone, like you and I. But I also knew that woman was okay because she was on the other side, reaching out to comfort a child. It wasn't the first time I had ever experienced a ghost. It was just the first time I ever interacted with one. Other times it was, yeah, you're there, so what? Leave me alone. I don't mess with you, you don't mess with me, kind of things. And that was just one of my experiences. I never considered myself, oh, psychic or any of that. My experiences were fleeting. I didn't have multitudes of them over my life. I mean, I could tell you when my brother was going to call me or show up because we were just that connected, I guess. I could tell you, oh, my mom's going to call, or oh, my dad's going to call. But I was very connected to those people. And because I had that ability, and I knew a lot of other people who didn't, I mean, they had it less often than I did. Ghosts were not surprising. And that was probably the only time I can think of. There might be other times that I will recall later where I actually saw the apparition or the ghost. Usually it's you hear something, you feel something, or just things moving and they're not supposed to. Now, I don't know about you, but I try to stay away from that subject because I think you can invite them around and you really don't want to do that. They have their own issues that they're dealing with and they're supposed to be dealing with. And you're not a part of that. Have you ever said something that you didn't mean it in a cruel way at all? You didn't say it in a cruel way, but it's just one of those things that's hard to explain to people so they can understand it. My mother was ill. She asked me, and I still have this regret. It pops in my head often. I never should have agreed to discuss that with her because the timing, at least for me, it may have been the right time for her to know what I believed in. I don't know. But she and I, we didn't share a whole lot of closeness. Most of our relationship was surface um, encounters. We didn't ever go deep into each other to know who each other was. Our lives took separate paths. I mean, and not because my mother was a bad mother. She was not. And if anybody wants to argue that with me, you better watch out. I already have one sister that was raised by my mother who will come after you and haunt you for saying anything bad about her. Because even though they squabbled, Oh, and they did. They adored each other more than life itself. And my mother proved that over and over and over again. And even after my sister left this world, my mother was determined in her heart, not going to say physically, tried to die, but in her heart, she gave up. Without Patty, she was lost and alone, and she didn't really know me. I mean, these are the kind of encounters between each other that can cause us, I think, to go through hauntings. And especially if you have a lot of deaths occurring frequently for a time period, say several years, um, you kind of figure out, is this what I'm looking at in the future? Because for me, I damn well know it is. And that's why having the conversation with my mother when I don't know if I'm standing on my own last leg about my belief systems about life and death. She was on her deathbed. Her kidneys were not failing, they were dead, they were gone. And she was, at some point, asked me, I was having trouble being able to physically take care of her because some of the issues when your kidneys fail is your body retains all that fluid and it's toxic and poisonous. And you have to go through dialysis to cleanse your body out. But her kidneys were so far gone that the treatments were only short lived before she would gain 100 to 200 pounds of water. Now, my mother was a tall woman, she was never overweight. And boy, this one is actually really difficult because I always wondered if she hears me when I tell her I didn't want it to come. I don't know if it came out in a way that she understood it, but didn't take it as I wanted her to leave. And her question to me was, "And don't you want to live longer?" I said, "Mom, I believe we give ourselves a designated time on this planet to achieve the knowledge we need to go back and fill in gaps of our knowledge on the other side with what we've learned here." I didn't get to say it to her that way. It came out more like the first part, yes, was right. It came out that I believe we do have a designated time and we need to achieve so much in that time while we're here. But we get sidetracked, totally sidetracked by life, by trauma, by things that happen around us. So when we're sidetracked, we eventually find our way back to the right way, the right path for us, and we move forward. Now, if my grandson, Anthony, ever watches this or should join us, I hope seriously that he takes this to heart because he is living a hardcore life. And when I say hardcore, I don't know about drugs. I do know that he has had his share of them and use of them. I know he has gotten in trouble with alcohol and other things. But when I say hardcore, I'm talking about the absolute choice to be homeless. He sees himself as so dysfunctional that he believes he should be homeless. Now, I hope that that will change, but I cannot say that it will because he's in his 20s now. He's he's not a little kid, and he lives sometimes in a city or a township when he needs work and a little money. And then when he's got some and he can get supplies, he takes off and goes and lives out in a tent on his own. And I know his anger issues, and he's trying not to put them out for other people. Because when you do that, you make yourself vulnerable to a lot of bad people who will say nice things to you in the beginning, but they have the same issues as you. They're just hiding it behind some nice advice, not always good. But his path is a path I did when I was young for a short time. I did not like living on the streets. Living at home could be really bad, really hard to do, and I could only do it for short periods of time before the aggression and the violence, verbal and physical, would get too much for me and I'd just take off. I mean, you call it, what do you call it? Upside down world. But you know what? What I'm talking about, this is the true Gen X generation's lives. My mother worked, my father worked. I had chores to do. If I wasn't in trouble, I was not at home. Only time I was at home was when I was grounded. Now, my parents got a little carried away with grounding when I was 14, 15. And like most parents do, they get exhausted. They don't know what to do. They just increase the isolation of the child, hoping the child is going to rethink and start acting right. Never works. Bad advice. Don't ever give that to your kids. Uh, that's Gen X growing up. That's why, they talk about the hose drinking. We did. And it was. I could go in and out of the house if my mother had the doors open. The air was on, no ma'am. If the heat was on, no ma'am. And my mother kept a good home. She she liked nice things. And um, my second father's ability to provide them was becoming limited because of economic change. I mean, when they bought their house in the 70s, you're talking, let's see, 77, 1978. They bought a house in Bolingbrook, big house, 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It was like, wow to us. And after living in the city of Chicago, I was starting to get in fights. So, yeah, life really changed when I got away from home. It wasn't, I'm not going to say it's any worse than it was at home, but it sure as hell wasn't any better. Everybody has a motive for what they do. Even if they tell you, no, I have no motive for my kindness towards you, they are a liar. They have a motive. Now, if their motive was genuine, they would tell you, well, no, it's just I like helping people. Here you go. That's a motive. People think a motive is a negative thing. It can be, especially when misused. You know, I don't think this world gets enough good advice anymore. I mean, I watch a lot of TikTok and Facebook and, of course, YouTube, and learned a lot from history. Some of it's believable, some of it's possible. But we don't know how to interact with each other anymore. And I think Gen X was the start of that. In if you want to talk about Gen X in realisticness, we were isolated. If it wasn't for our friends, we had nobody. And when we got old enough to work, well, a lot of those friendships, they didn't end on bad terms. It's just everybody had to go to work and get jobs and took on bills, took on life. Kids today, they're not prepared for life at all. At all. I feel sorry for them. I see more of them so angry about the inequality of life that Gen X, boomers, we know this is just, unless you can come up with a better idea without blowing everybody up, hey, I'm down to hear it, no doubt. But most people don't believe that's possible. Well, how do you take down a government without going to war? Because that government's going to go to war, even if you're not fighting. And it's proven if you stand in front of a machine gun and fire and you don't shoot back, you're dead. Proven fact. I mean, and with all the things that we think are wrong with life in this, whatever dimension you want to call it, they're not wrong somewhere else because they're not done in that way. So, yeah, it's uh, it's lonely out here. All right, guys, I'm 42 minutes in. I've seen two people. Damn, it's lonely out here. I'm gonna have a cigarette since nobody watching. I'm funny about smoking in front of people I don't know. I'm not even around you, and you can't be anywhere in my smoke. My smoke can't touch you. But it feels funny. But you know what? In the old days, I used to sit down in a restaurant, eat my dinner, have a cigarette while I waited for my food to come after was to light your cigarette. Because as soon as you did, she's going to be right there with 4 glasses of water. Hey, how can I help you today? How you doing? Yes, I'm blah, blah, blah. And today's menu. God, I remember those days. I used to be one of those. I was a good waitress. I made good money. Now, when they tried to put, well, I put myself in restaurants that were supposedly fancy, but these people were uncomfortable sitting chair to chair, no room for a waitress to really come in, and they're bringing massive. I did that one too. It was not worth the money. Um, Omega Steakhouse in Wheaton, Illinois. Great food, terrible layout for a restaurant that busy. I would set that restaurant up on by reservation only. That way they don't over occupy their own building because if they have a fire with that many people back to back, close, up on each other, it's just it will become Omega Toasted Steakhouse, and the steaks will be us. It's not good. I don't know. It may have changed by now. It may not even be in business. I mean, the last time I was there was in the early 90s, 93, I think, was when I worked there. Money was phenomenal, but you'd be surprised how many rich people will steal from a waitress. I had people reaching in my aprons to steal money all the time. Now, when I worked at George's, I never had that issue, not once. And it was a much smaller restaurant, and he cooked and provided Greek food, which was fabulous. It was delicious. His restaurant was clean, service was good. Weekends were mobbed because it was connected to a bar and it was open 24/7. I really liked that place. There was this one lady that worked there. Uh, she would, my boss, George, would be the one at the register early in the morning. Now, I worked usually midnights. And so I'd be sitting at the counter doing my tickets and paperwork for the night and counting my tips out and everything and having my coffee before I went home. And every morning, this woman named Kate would come in, and George would be at the register, and she would say, "Good morning, George," in this sweet little voice, and he would say, "Fuck you, Kate," and she would just walk away with this great big smile and not deterred at all by what he had said. It was their morning routine. It was his way of saying good morning to her, and he had no problem with vulgarity. And if his customers had a problem with it, which was rare, uh, they were more than welcome to leave. George's restaurant was very well established. He had been there for something like 60 years. So he wasn't going nowhere. He was not worried. If you went in there to get for real treated, you went to the right place. Because he would walk up to you if you complained about your food. He would walk up to you and ask you, please, what is wrong? What is wrong? Tell me. We fix it now. We fix it. You know, when someone says that and they look like that you're not going to argue with them. They're going to fix your food. And then George would take their food, put it in containers, give them the food back, and then bring them plates of fresh food, the whatever way they had asked for that they didn't get. He was that kind of man. And he worked the room. He did not sit behind his desk. In fact, his office was teeny tiny, so he did not stay in there. If he was not in the kitchen watching what was going on with the cooks, he was doing inventory. He was a 100% businessman, and you did not argue with him. I mean, you could. I did a few times, and the only person that he didn't argue with was his wife, Olivia. He was scared of that woman. That was funny. He was. She always told him that if he ever cheated on her and betrayed her, that she would put a curse on him that would last generations to kill out all his seed. And she said this in the middle of a restaurant because a woman she didn't know called their house. I know everyone you know, George. Who is this? Why is she calling? I'm going to do this if you. And George is trying to rush her out of the restaurant and, get her off in the distance to have his calm down session because it was going to be a challenge. But it was usually a travel agent because George would pay for workers to come in from Greece, from Italy, uh, and work in his restaurant. And he would do this because poverty was very harsh on his family there in Greece. And he didn't just pick any, he worked with his family to build his business. And over the years, I mean, you're talking, let's see, oh, early 1900s. Now you're talking a Greek man. He was quick to get out of the cities. He got out of Chicago as fast as he could. Uh, he said that his parents started in New York, but they were not going to have a child who was going to be destroyed by cartels like they were in Greece. They were not going to have it. They moved him out to Lockport, Illinois, which at the time was a small town, and it it they did a lot of shipyards there. They did a lot of stuff in the canal and in oil refinery. And his family started there. And then they decided they didn't want to do that forever, and you can't blame them. They started their own business, a restaurant. And it just turned out that they had excellent recipes that could appease even some of the worst uh, critics. Uh, but he was not your traditional American. He was definitely a Greek American. And they came here the right way. I want you to know that. That's important for these days. People talk about, oh, he was an immigrant. No, 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 no. His parents migrated here during World War II. They fled here, and they lived on Ellis Island for a while, and they went through everything they had to go through to become eligible to become a citizen in this country. And back then, they had just as much corruption, just as many laws, and just as much bigotry and racism as they do maybe today. I mean, they say it's less maybe in the cities where we're more accustomed. I mean, in Lockport, I called it the street we lived on, I called it the United Nations, because next door was Mexican, across the street was Polish, across the street on the other side was Puerto Rican, and then we had the lovely black people that lived next door with their twin daughters who were phenomenal singers. I can't recall their names. I'm thinking maybe a Tanya or something. I'm not sure. It's been a long time ago. But okay, I have been talking for 53 minutes. I've told you some stories about my life, and now I'm tired. I'm sorry I missed everybody. And if you do watch this and enjoy some, leave some comments, and by all means, subscribe, like. I like likes. I would love to see some likes, and to have an audience that would engage with me is important to me, because I'd like to hear what people think about the stories I tell. I mean, these are just my life story. It's like, you go sit on the porch with grandma and she's just rattling her brain about whatever things she's recalling at the time. And the videos that I've done like that I did live, did get views later after the airing. And I'm hoping that's going to be the case with this one. I really do. And if you would like to hear some of the longer versions of some of my stories, I would love to share them. I had a pretty full life. It wasn't all just hard work. I worked hard, of course, everybody does. But it was very full. I mean, I would say, I didn't go climbing mountains. I didn't. But I did skydive once. And it was a date. And it was back then not afraid of heights. And I really thought it was one of the coolest dates I'd ever been on up to that point. And I hadn't been on many. So jumping out of an airplane for a first date was pretty cool. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm tired. It's been a long day for me. And I will be back to annoy tomorrow. And hopefully we'll get more viewers. I love you all. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And I'll talk to you all later. Be safe. Be good to each other. There's a whole lot of life you still gotta live.